Alright, cosmic dreamers, settle in. Pull that nebula soft blanket a little closer. Tonight, we're not venturing into the crushing blackness of intergalactic voids, nor are we wrestling with the mind-bending physics of a singularity. No, tonight our journey is a little closer to home, relatively speaking, though still a good many desolate, radiation-soaked miles away. We're heading to Mars, our rusty, dusty, and perennially fascinating neighbor, the Red Planet. Or, as we might call it for our purposes this evening, the grand, crimson screen upon which humanity has projected its wildest hopes, its most elaborate fictions, and occasionally, its most embarrassing optical illusions. Yes, Mars. It hangs there in our night sky, a tiny, fiery ember, and for centuries, it has burned just as brightly in our collective imagination. We've looked up, squinted, and with a rather charming, if somewhat persistent human arrogance, decided we knew exactly what was going on up there. Spoilers, we were mostly wrong. Hilariously, wonderfully, and sometimes profoundly wrong. And that's our gentle voyage for tonight, a sleepy exploration of the times Mars fooled us, the grand cosmic pranks it played on our eager eyes and even more eager brains. And as we drift through these stories, we'll uncover the soothing, perhaps even ironically comforting science behind why we see things that aren't there, and why that's not just okay, but a rather endearing part of being a sentient creature in a universe that frankly doesn't offer many easy answers. Or any answers most of the time. It mostly offers silence. And rocks. Lots and lots of rocks. So let yourself sink deeper now. Imagine the gentle tug of your bed, not unlike the weak but persistent gravity of Mars itself. We're setting our course for that ochre point of light, but we're also journeying inward, into the curious landscape of the human mind, that magnificent pattern-seeking machine that can compose symphonies, build starships, and also see a fully fledged canal-building civilization in a blurry telescope image. Oh, the human brain. Such a clever, clever organ. So adept at spotting the saber-toothed tiger in the rustling grass, which was great for survival on the primordial savanna. Less useful, perhaps, when interpreting low-resolution data from another planet, but bless its cotton socks, it tries. It really tries. Tonight, we're not here to mock our ancestors or even our more recent selves for these imaginative leaps. Far from it. There's a strange beauty in our capacity to dream, to fill the vast, silent unknown with stories. It's a testament to our relentless curiosity, our unshakable hope that we're not entirely alone in this cosmic theater. Or if we are, that at least the decor is interesting. Mars became the ultimate cosmic Rorschach test. You see what you want to see. Or sometimes what you're terrified of seeing. But mostly what you rather desperately hope to see. We'll drift back to times when the line between rigorous scientific observation and, shall we say, enthusiastic interpretation was a little fuzzier. Think of it as a gentle archaeological dig into the layers of human understanding, uncovering not ancient Martian cities, but the equally fascinating fossils of our own evolving perceptions. We'll find that these foolings, these grand misinterpretations, are not signs of failure, but rather milestones on our journey to understanding. Each one, in its own way, nudged science forward, compelling us to build better instruments, ask sharper questions, and be a little more humble in the face of the universe's magnificent indifference to our narratives. The universe, you see, doesn't really care if you think Mars is crisscrossed with aqueducts built by tiny green engineers. It just keeps spinning, bathed in solar radiation, its thin atmosphere doing a remarkably poor job of keeping things cozy. It's a harsh truth, that cosmic disinterest. Your grand theories, your heartfelt beliefs about little Martian farmers tending their alien crops. The universe just shrugs. A vast, silent, dusty shrug. And yet, there's a strange kind of peace in that, isn't there? A release. If the cosmos doesn't care, then perhaps we can lighten up a bit too. Perhaps we can chuckle at our own eagerness, our own brilliantly flawed attempts to paint a familiar face onto the unknown. So, as we begin this journey, let go of any pressure to know. Tonight is about the beauty of not knowing, the allure of the mystery, and the gentle, almost comical unfolding of how we slowly, painstakingly replace grand fictions with even grander, though sometimes starker, realities. We're going to look at how a planet millions of miles away became a mirror, reflecting our own inner landscapes. The red hope, yes, because we hoped for life, for kinship, for wonder. And the red herring, because so often what we thought we saw led us down some wonderfully scenic, but ultimately mistaken garden paths. Or more accurately, Martian dust-filled gullies. Breathe in and out. feel the gentle rhythm. We are not just stargazers tonight. We are story listeners, and the story is as much about us as it is about Mars. It's a story of light, shadow, and the curious tricks our minds play in the twilight zones of perception. It's a story of how eager we are to find a friend in the dark, even if that friend turns out to be a curiously shaped mountain range or a trick of the light. And there's no shame in that. It's human. Endearingly, frustratingly, beautifully human. So let's drift, shall we? Towards that rusty globe, and into the heart of its most captivating illusions. The truth, as we'll find, is often less romantic, but in its own stark, scientific way, far more wondrous and perhaps, just perhaps, more deeply relaxing than any fiction we could conjure. After all, a universe that doesn't need our stories to be spectacular is a universe we can simply observe, and in that observation find a profound, quiet peace, even if it's just observing a lot of very, very old dust. And so we drift, not through the inky black of true interstellar space just yet, but through the slightly less inky black, punctuated by that tantalizing red spark. Our first major fooling on Mars, our first grand collective hallucination, if you will, comes courtesy of a rather determined and one might say imaginative gentleman named Percival Lowell. Percival. Born into wealth, brother to a poet and a president of Harvard. He wasn't some wild-eyed crank scribbling in a garret. He was a man of status, of education, who, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, turned his considerable resources and intellect towards the heavens, and specifically towards Mars. Imagine him, if you will, perched high atop his observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. The Lowell Observatory, still a respected institution today. The air is thin and crisp, the desert night sky a velvet canvas pricked with diamond dust. He's peering through the eyepiece of his state-of-the-art, for the time, 24-inch refracting telescope, a magnificent brass and mahogany beast. Night after night, year after year he sketched. He observed. He believed. And what did Percival Lowell believe he saw? Not just a few blurry smudges, oh no. He saw a world. A dying world, perhaps, but a world nonetheless, populated by intelligent beings possessed of an engineering prowess that would make the builders of the Suez Canal look like toddlers playing with mud pies. He saw canals. Canali, as the Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli had first called them in 1877. Schiaparelli, it's worth noting, used the Italian word canali to mean channels, or grooves, natural features. But language, as we know, is a slippery beast. When canali was translated into English as canals, well, that word came with baggage. Canals are artificial. Canals are built. Canals imply builders. Martians. Lowell didn't just run with this idea. He launched it into geostationary orbit. He mapped these canals with meticulous, almost obsessive detail. Hundreds of them. Straight as Roman roads, intersecting at great oases, which he envisioned as Martian cities or agricultural hubs. He drew intricate charts, published books, Mars in 1895, Mars and its canals in 1906, Mars as the abode of life in 1908. These weren't just dry scientific treatises. They were captivating narratives. Lowell painted a picture of an ancient, desiccated planet, its inhabitants, older and wiser than us, desperately fighting for survival. Their world was drying up, so these ingenious Martians, with their advanced understanding of hydraulics and civic engineering, had constructed a planet-girdling network of canals to bring water from the polar ice caps to their parched equatorial regions. It was a compelling story, a romantic story, a story that captured the public imagination like wildfire. Think of the sheer audacity of it. An entire civilization, engaged in a planetary-scale terraforming project, visible from Earth. It was the stuff of H.G. Wells, but presented as sober scientific fact. Lowell's Martians were not monstrous invaders, but tragic heroes, a sophisticated, perhaps melancholic, race clinging to existence on a fading world. Their industrious efforts, etching lines across the face of their planet, were a testament to their intelligence and perseverance. One could almost admire them, these fictional water-starved engineers. And people did. The idea of Martian canals became deeply ingrained in popular culture. For decades, if you thought of Mars, you thought of Lowell's canals. You thought of those industrious, unseen beings. It shaped our science fiction, our dreams of space travel, our very perception of what might be out there. Lowell wasn't just describing a planet. He was crafting a mythos, a grand cosmic opera of survival and ingenuity. He saw the seasonal changes on Mars, the way the dark areas seemed to spread and recede, as evidence of vegetation blooming along the banks of these canals when the meltwater flowed. A perfectly logical deduction if your premise of planet-spanning irrigation systems was correct. Which of course it wasn't, not even remotely. It's easy with our high-resolution imagery from orbiters and rovers to look back and smirk. How could anyone believe something so elaborate, so specific? Based on what were essentially faint, fleeting alignments of dark patches seen through a telescope, often at the very limit of visibility, shimmering and shifting in Earth's own turbulent atmosphere. But Lowell was persuasive. He had the credentials, the observatory, the unwavering conviction. And perhaps, more importantly, people wanted to believe. In an age of great industrial and colonial expansion on Earth, the idea of an even grander, older civilization undertaking such monumental works elsewhere held a certain allure. It made us feel a little less alone, perhaps, or maybe just a little less significant, which can be its own strange comfort. So let yourself picture it. The quiet dedication of Lowell, night after night, his eye pressed to the cold brass of the eyepiece, sketching lines that weren't truly lines, connecting dots that weren't truly oases. He was, in a way, a cartographer of the imagination, mapping a world that existed more vividly in his mind, and subsequently in the minds of millions, than it did in reality. He was seeing his own intellect, his own era's preoccupations with engineering and grand projects, reflected back at him from the surface of another world. A classic case of finding what you're looking for whether it's there or not. The Canals of Mars became the grandest, most ambitious public works project never undertaken. A testament not to Martian engineering but to human hope, human ingenuity in storytelling, and the remarkable ability of our brains to connect the dots, even if the dots are just random smudges of dust and rock seen across a gulf of 40 million miles. The sheer, beautiful, intricate, and utterly wrong elegance of Lowell's Martian waterworks. A magnificent folly, built not of Martian concrete, but of human dreams. And as you drift, perhaps you can feel a faint echo of that grand, mistaken ambition, a soothing reminder that even our grandest errors can be rather beautiful in their own way. Now, as we float gently away from Percival Lowell's meticulously mapped, yet entirely imaginary Martian waterways, let's peer a little closer at why he saw them. Why did this educated, dedicated man, and indeed many others who followed his lead for a time, perceive such intricate networks on a world where, as we now know, none exist? It wasn't, for the most part, deliberate fabrication. It was something far more subtle, far more human, and in its own way, far more fascinating for our sleepy contemplation. It was a cocktail of optical illusions, the inherent limitations of the human eye-brain system, and a healthy dose of, well, let's call it observational optimism. Imagine yourself for a moment in Lowell's position. You're staring for hours at a tiny, shimmering disk of light. Mars, even at its closest approach, is a challenging target. Earth's atmosphere, that lovely blanket of air that keeps us alive, is also a rather annoying, turbulent lens. It rides and ripples, making distant objects waver and blur. Astronomers call this seeing, and when the seeing is bad, it's like trying to read a newspaper through a heat haze rising from asphalt on a summer's day. Or, perhaps more unpleasantly, like trying to discern fine detail through the bottom of a beer glass after one too many. Things get suggestive. Lowell was pushing the limits of what was observable with the technology of his time. And when you're at the very edge of perception, your brain, that ever-helpful pattern matcher we met earlier, tends to step in and try to make sense of noisy, incomplete data. It hates ambiguity. It sees a few faint, disconnected smudges, a dark spot here, a slightly less dark spot there, all swimming in and out of focus, and it tries to connect them. It's like those connect-the-dots puzzles we did as children. Given a scattering of points, the brain wants to draw lines. Straight lines, preferably, because they're simple, elegant, and efficient. So, those faint, irregular dark patches on Mars, the albedo features, areas of darker or lighter rock and dust, which are genuinely there, would have appeared to Lowell as ephemeral, tantalizing hints. His eye, strained from hours of observation, and his brain, primed by Schiaparelli's Canali, and his own burgeoning theories of a dying Martian civilization, would have done the rest. It's a well-known optical phenomenon. The eye can perceive linear features when observing a series of disconnected dots at the threshold of visibility. It's a bit like staring at a patterned wallpaper for too long. Eventually, you start seeing faces or shapes that aren't intentionally there. Your visual cortex is essentially saying, well, this mess of input must mean something, let me tidy it up for you. Add to this the fact that Lowell was often sketching from memory immediately after observing, a practice prone to unconscious bias. If you expect to see canals, or if you saw something last night that you thought was a canal, you're more likely to interpret tonight's blurry smudge in the same way. It's confirmation bias, writ large across the face of another planet. He wasn't seeing with just his eyes, he was seeing with his theories, his hopes, his entire narrative of Martian civilization. And then there's the telescope itself. While a 24-inch refractor was a magnificent instrument, it, like all optical devices, has its limitations. Imperfections in the lenses, diffraction effects, the way light itself behaves when passing through an aperture. All these can introduce subtle artifacts. And there was even a suggestion, rather unkind perhaps but not entirely dismissible, that Lowell might have inadvertently been observing the blood vessels in his own eye, projected against the bright image of Mars after prolonged staring. A sort of involuntary internal canal system. The irony would be quite something, wouldn't it? Mapping the intricate vascular network of his own retina and mistaking it for the grand engineering works of an alien race. It's a stark reminder of how profoundly our own biology can mediate, and sometimes distort, our perception of the universe. Makes you wonder what noise from our own internal systems we're still misinterpreting today, doesn't it? Perhaps that faint ringing in your ears isn't tinnitus, but the whisper of dark matter. Unlikely, but the universe has surprised us before. So, there was no grand conspiracy of Martian civil engineers. There was just geology, atmospheric distortion, the limits of optical instruments, and the beautifully flawed, pattern-seeking nature of the human mind. The canals were phantoms, born of straining eyes and fervent imaginations, ghosts in the machine of observation. And the oases where these canals met? Likely just larger, darker albedo features, or perhaps the visual confluence of several illusory lines. It's a humbling thought, really. All that intellectual effort, all that public excitement, all those intricate maps, based on what amounted to cosmic static. Yet this failure was incredibly productive. The controversy surrounding Lowell's canals spurred on further research. It pushed astronomers to develop better observational techniques, to be more critical of their interpretations. It highlighted the need for skepticism, for rigorous testing of hypotheses. In a way, Lowell's phantom canals helped to lay the groundwork for a more scientific, less romanticized approach to planetary science. It was a necessary, if somewhat embarrassing, step in our journey of cosmic understanding. And as you lie there, letting your own mind drift, perhaps you can appreciate the gentle irony. The very act of seeking order and intelligence on Mars led to a deeper understanding of the beautiful disorder and inherent biases within ourselves. The Martians weren't digging canals, we were digging ourselves into a fascinating, if ultimately incorrect, interpretative hole. And the slow, steady climb out of that hole, guided by more data, better images, and a healthy dose of self-correction, is the quiet, soothing rhythm of scientific progress. No grand pronouncements, just the gentle chipping away at illusion, revealing a reality that is often less dramatic but always in its own way more profound. Sleep now on that thought. The universe doesn't always give us what we want to see, but it often shows us something about ourselves. Having gently laid to rest the grand planet-girdling irrigation schemes of Percival Lowell's Martians, let's tune our cosmic ears to another, more ethereal form of Martian misdirection. The phantom voices, the mysterious signals, the whispers from the void that for a time hinted at, well, someone trying to get in touch. If you can't see them building canals, perhaps you can hear them chatting on their interplanetary radio? Or so the hopeful logic went. As radio technology blossomed on Earth in the early 20th century, it wasn't long before eager inventors and curious scientists turned their newly crafted electronic ears towards the heavens. If there were intelligent beings out there, surely they'd be using radio waves just like us. It was the bright, shiny new toy of communication, and we naturally assumed any sophisticated alien civilization would have unwrapped theirs millennia ago. Mars, being relatively close and already suspected of harboring advanced life, thanks, Percival, was a prime candidate for eavesdropping. Picture this scene. Marconi, Tesla, names synonymous with the dawn of radio, musing about the possibility of interstellar communication. In 1901, Nikola Tesla, ever the visionary, ever the enigmatic showman, claimed to have detected rhythmic signals with his experimental station in Colorado Springs. He speculated they could be from Mars or Venus. He described them as intelligible signals, consisting of 3 and later 4 impulses of an indisputable character. Martians counting, perhaps? Practicing their interplanetary Morse code? The public, already primed by tales of canals, was fascinated. The idea of Martians not just existing but actively trying to signal us was electrifying. It was the cosmic equivalent of hearing a faint knock on a very distant door. Of course, Tesla was, well, Tesla. A genius, undoubtedly, but also prone to pronouncements that outpaced his proof. What was he actually picking up? Almost certainly not Martian chit-chat. More likely, it was naturally occurring radio emissions from Earth's own ionosphere, or even distant thunderstorms, phenomena poorly understood at the time. His instruments were sensitive but also indiscriminate. They were picking up the crackle and pop of our own planet, and perhaps, with a dash of hopeful interpretation, these were woven into a narrative of alien communication. It's like living next to a busy highway and convincing yourself the rumble of trucks is actually a giant purring. Then, in the 1920s, as Mars made a particularly close approach to Earth, there was another flurry of excitement. The US government even requested a period of radio silence, hoping that any faint Martian broadcasts might be more clearly heard without our own terrestrial chatter drowning them out. David Peck Todd, an astronomer, set up a listening experiment with the help of the military. The newspapers ran breathless headlines. "Mars to signal Earth tonight." Imagine the anticipation. Families gathered around their crackling radio sets, not for the latest jazz tune, but for the first hello from another world. And what did they hear? Mostly static. A few intriguing blips and bloops, some rhythmic pulses, enough to keep the hope alive for a while. But again, these were almost certainly misinterpretations. Some signals were later traced to unshielded electrical equipment, others to Morse code transmissions from naval stations bouncing off the ionosphere in unexpected ways. One message, decoded as a series of dots and dashes that spelled out, says, not exactly profound wisdom from an advanced civilization. Perhaps the Martians were just very laconic. Or maybe, just maybe, it was a garbled piece of terrestrial traffic. The universe, you see, is a noisy place, even without intelligent life adding to the cacophony. Planets with magnetic fields, like Jupiter, are powerful radio sources. The sun itself erupts with radio bursts. Distant pulsars beep with astonishing regularity. Cosmic rays striking the upper atmosphere create showers of secondary particles that can generate radio waves. Without sophisticated receivers, directional antennas, and a deep understanding of all these natural sources, it's easy to mistake cosmic background noise, or even your neighbor's faulty spark plugs, for a message from ET. It's another beautiful example of our eagerness, our deep-seated desire for connection. We are, at heart, a social species. The thought of being the only conversationalist in this vast cosmic salon can be a bit chilling. So we listen. We strain our ears, now amplified by colossal radio dishes, listening for that one anomalous signal, that whisper against the roar of the universe. And sometimes, in our eagerness, we hear phantoms. We hear the universe clearing its throat and mistake it for a greeting. There's a certain poignancy to these early attempts, isn't there? The image of people huddled around primitive radios, hoping to catch a syllable from another world. It speaks to a profound loneliness, perhaps, but also to an equally profound optimism. The belief that if we just listen hard enough, if we just build a sensitive enough receiver, we'll find we're not talking to ourselves. But Mars, so far, has remained stubbornly silent on the radio front. Its thin atmosphere and lack of a global magnetic field mean it's not a strong natural radio emitter in the way Jupiter is. And as for artificial signals, well, the silence from Mars is, in its own way, a message. Not a hostile one, not even an indifferent one necessarily. Just quiet. The quiet of a world that, as far as we can tell, never developed a civilization keen on broadcasting its existence to the cosmos. Or perhaps they did, and they used a technology we can't even imagine. Or maybe they just preferred a good book to daytime television. The phantom croaks and whispers from Mars, the tantalizing clicks and buzzes that turned out to be just the universe humming to itself, or our own machines talking in their sleep, they serve as a gentle reminder. A reminder to listen carefully, to question our interpretations, and to appreciate the vast, complex symphony of natural sounds the cosmos produces. It's not the conversation we were hoping for, perhaps, but it's a conversation nonetheless, if we learn how to understand its language. A language written in radio waves, in X-rays, in gravitational ripples. Mars taught us that sometimes, the most profound messages are found not in what we think we hear, but in the careful, patient untangling of what is truly being said by the universe itself. And in that quiet understanding, there is a deep and surprisingly soothing kind of wisdom. Having strained our imaginary ears for Martian radio broadcasts and found only the universe's ambient hum, let's now turn our gaze back to the visual, to another subtle trick Mars played on our hopeful eyes, the great green delusion of Martian springtime. For decades, even before Lowell's Canals became mainstream, observers noted that Mars wasn't just a static, rusty ball. It changed. There were seasonal variations in its albedo features, those darker and lighter patches on its surface. And to many, these changes looked remarkably like vegetation. Imagine, if you will, the polar ice caps of Mars. We can see them even with relatively modest telescopes, gleaming white against the ochre disk. And observers noted that as spring came to a Martian hemisphere, the polar cap would shrink, as one would expect ice to do when warmed. Simultaneously, a wave of darkening would seem to spread from the receding cap towards the equator. And then, as Martian autumn approached, this darkening would fade, only for the process to repeat in the other hemisphere. What could this be, they wondered, if not the seasonal bloom of plant life, spreading across the plains as meltwater from the poles became available? It was a beautifully logical inference. Water melts, plants grow. We see it happen every year on Earth. Why not on Mars? This idea of Martian vegetation took firm root, intertwined with Lowell's canals, but also existing independently. It painted a picture of Mars not as a completely barren desert, but as a world with at least some hardy form of life, perhaps analogous to Earth's tundra or lichens, clinging to existence in a harsh environment. The dark areas, the Maria, Latin for seas, a term inherited from early telescopic observers who mistook them for actual bodies of water, were reinterpreted as vast plains covered in this hardy Martian flora. As the seasons turned, these plains would darken with new growth, then lighten as the plants died back or became dormant. It was a far cry from lush earthly jungles, perhaps, but it was life. The famous science fiction writer H.G. Wells, in his The War of the Worlds, described Martian vegetation as having a reddish-brown, or cinder hue, a detail that cleverly resonated with the planet's overall color while still allowing for the concept of plant life. Other popular depictions showed hardy mosses, scrubby bushes, or even vast fields of alien crops, all contributing to this vision of a planet that, while perhaps not teeming, was certainly not dead. The evocative power of this idea is hard to overstate. It made Mars feel familiar, a little less alien. If plants could grow there, even primitive ones, then perhaps other, more complex life forms weren't such a stretch. It fed into the narrative of Mars as a world that was perhaps past its prime, but still held onto the tenacious spark of biology. Think of the quiet satisfaction an astronomer might have felt, night after night, charting these subtle darkenings, believing they were witnessing the pulse of life on another world, a silent, slow-motion bloom millions of miles away. It's a rather romantic notion, isn't it? The universe as a garden, with Mars as one of its more resilient, if somewhat parched, flower beds. But alas, as our observational tools grew more sophisticated, and as we began to send our first robotic emissaries towards the Red Planet in the 1960s and 70s, this charming picture began to, well, dry up. The Mariner spacecraft flew by Mars, sending back images of a cratered, moon-like surface, with no obvious signs of widespread vegetation. The Viking landers touched down in the mid-70s, equipped with cameras and experiments specifically designed to look for signs of life. Their cameras revealed breathtaking but barren landscapes of reddish rocks and dust under a pink sky. No Martian prairies, no hardy shrubs, not even a patch of alien lichen clinging to a rock. The biological experiments, while initially producing some ambiguous results that caused a flurry of excitement, were ultimately interpreted as being due to unusual soil chemistry rather than Martian microbes having a go at the chicken soup. So, what was causing those seasonal changes, that wave of darkening that so convincingly mimicked the spread of vegetation? The answer, like many truths about Mars, is simpler, dustier, and far less biologically exciting. It's mostly about wind. Mars has a thin atmosphere, but it's dynamic enough to support winds, sometimes massive, planet-girdling dust storms. These winds move fine, bright dust around the surface, alternately covering and uncovering areas of darker underlying rock or coarser sand. As the polar caps shrink in the Martian spring, it's not just water ice sublimating, turning directly from solid to gas. It's also a significant amount of carbon dioxide ice, dry ice. The changes in temperature and atmospheric pressure associated with this sublimation can drive winds. These winds then sweep away the brighter, fine dust that may have settled during the Martian winter, revealing the darker bedrock or coarser sand beneath. So, the wave of darkening wasn't life-spreading. It was essentially a planetary-scale spring cleaning, a gust of wind whisking away a layer of pale dust. Imagine blowing dust off an old, dark wooden table. The underlying surface appears darker. That's Mars on a colossal scale. There are also subtle chemical changes that can occur on the surface due to variations in temperature and exposure to ultraviolet radiation, which might slightly alter the color of minerals. But the primary driver for those large-scale seasonal albedo changes? Good old-fashioned wind and dust. Not quite as romantic as Martian fields stirring to life, is it? A planet-wide dust-off doesn't have the same poetic ring as the greening of Mars. It's another instance where our Earth-centric expectations led us astray. We see seasonal changes, we think biology. But Mars operates by its own rules, its own stark, beautiful, and largely lifeless, as far as we know, geological and atmospheric processes. The disappointment might be tinged with a little sadness for that lost dream of a verdant Mars, but there's also a clean, crisp satisfaction in the scientific explanation. It's less woo, more whoosh, the sound of wind over desolate plains. And as you settle deeper into your own quiet place, let the image of those vast, dusty plains soothe you. There's a profound stillness in that image, a stark beauty that doesn't need life to be compelling. The universe isn't obliged to mirror our own biological exuberance everywhere we look. Sometimes, the grandest spectacles are purely physical, purely chemical, driven by the fundamental forces of nature playing out on a planetary scale. And understanding that, accepting that, can be deeply calming. The great green delusion has faded, replaced by the equally fascinating, if less overtly alive reality of a world shaped by wind, dust, and the slow, patient grind of geological time. A world quietly doing its own thing, oblivious to our springtime fantasies. And that's perfectly peacefully okay. From the grand, sweeping illusions of planetary-scale engineering and seasonal verdure, we now zoom in, focusing our imaginary lens on a single, enigmatic feature that, for a time, stared back at us from the Martian dust with an uncannily familiar gaze. We're journeying to a region of Mars called Cydonia, and to a particular rock formation that, in 1976, became an overnight sensation, a cosmic celebrity, and our Kelly of the rock world, if you will, only with better press, at least initially. I'm talking, of course, about the face on Mars. It was NASA's Viking 1 orbiter, diligently mapping the Martian surface in preparation for its lander counterpart, that snapped the now infamous photograph. Image 35A72, to be precise. There, amidst a jumble of mesas and buttes in the Cydonia region, lay a feature roughly 1.5 miles long that bore an astonishing resemblance to a human face. It had what appeared to be eyes, a nose, a mouth, even a sort of headdress or hairstyle, all shadowed and defined by the oblique angle of the sun. It was monumental, stoic, and undeniably face-like. When the image was released to the public, tucked away in a NASA press release with a caption suggesting it was a trick of light and shadow, the public, bless its enthusiastic heart, largely ignored the caveat. A face? On Mars? Built by whom? The implications were staggering. This wasn't some subtle, debatable network of lines, or a faint seasonal blush. This was a giant, Giza pyramid-scale sculpture staring heavenward. The kind of thing you build if you really, really want to be noticed. Or if you're a naturally occurring geological formation that just happens to catch the light in a particularly suggestive way. But the former was, understandably, the far more exciting option. The face on Mars ignited a firestorm of speculation that Lowell's Canals, in their heyday, could only have dreamed of. This was the television age, the age of burgeoning internet forums. The image was everywhere. Books were written. Documentaries were made. Self-proclaimed experts emerged from the woodwork, deciphering its message, linking it to ancient astronaut theories, Egyptian pyramids, ley lines, and probably the lost city of Atlantis, which presumably had a Martian branch office. Some saw not just a face but nearby formations that they interpreted as pyramids, a city complex, even a fortress. Cydonia became a sort of alien archaeological dig site in the popular imagination. The allure was undeniable. Here was tangible photographic proof, or so it seemed, or of an advanced, intelligent civilization on Mars. A civilization capable of monumental architecture, perhaps one that had left this enigmatic visage as a marker, a message, or a tombstone. The face was ancient, weathered, half-buried in Martian sand, evoking a sense of lost grandeur, a cosmic Ozymandias. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Except this Ozymandias had a better publicist. The proponents of its artificiality pointed to its apparent symmetry, the seemingly deliberate placement of its features. They argued that the odds of such a perfect likeness forming naturally were astronomically small. They accused NASA of a cover-up, of deliberately downplaying the significance of the discovery, perhaps to avoid mass panic, or maybe because they were secretly in league with the men in black, who were themselves probably Martians on a long-term Earth assignment. The narrative possibilities were endless and deliciously conspiratorial. It's easy to get swept up in that kind of excitement, isn't it? The thrill of a mystery, the tantalizing hint of something truly paradigm-shifting. Imagine being one of the first people to see that image, to feel that jolt of recognition. That's a face. It taps into something primal in us, our innate ability and eagerness to recognize faces, a skill honed by millennia of social interaction. We see faces in clouds, in burnt toast, in the knots of a wooden plank. Our brains are face-finding supercomputers. And here was a face on a cosmic scale, staring out from another world. It was the ultimate, "Are we alone?" question, seemingly answered with a stony, silent gaze. For over 2 decades, the face on Mars remained a potent symbol of extraterrestrial mystery. NASA, to its credit, always maintained that it was likely a natural landform, a mesa, sculpted by eons of Martian wind erosion, with a face-like appearance due to the low resolution of the Viking camera and the specific angle of illumination. They patiently explained that shadows can play incredible tricks. But for many, this was just part of the official story, the bland, boring explanation designed to quell our curiosity. The truth, they felt, was out there in Cydonia. The story of the face is a perfect little capsule of human psychology. Our pattern-seeking brains, our love of a good story, especially one involving aliens, our suspicion of authority, and our deep-seated yearning for the extraordinary. It's like a cosmic campfire tale, whispered across the vastness of space. Did you hear about the giant head they found on Mars? They say it watches you. The face of Cydonia, in that initial grainy black and white image, held a certain majesty, a brooding, enigmatic quality. It was the universe looking back at us, or so we wanted to believe. It was a mystery that begged to be solved, a silent invitation to explore, to question, to dream. And for a good long while, it kept us dreaming very, very vividly. But as we'll see, even the most stoic of stone faces can change when you get a closer look, or when the sun simply moves a little higher in the sky. For now, though, let that image hang in your mind. A colossal, silent sentinel on a distant world, a testament to, well, to something. We weren't quite sure what, but it was definitely something to talk about. And in the quiet of your own approaching sleep, perhaps you can appreciate that thrill of discovery, that moment of what if, before the colder, harder light of more data shines down. Now, as the image of that enigmatic, mile-long face on Mars hovers gently in our minds, let's take a soft detour into the fascinating and often amusing workings of our own brains. Why are we so good, so incredibly quick, to spot a face in a jumble of Martian rocks, or for that matter, in a coffee stain, a cloud formation, or the burn marks on a piece of toast that subsequently sells for thousands on eBay? The answer lies in a wonderfully human psychological phenomenon called Pareidolia. And understanding it is, in its own way, deeply soothing. It's like finally getting the instruction manual for a particularly quirky piece of software you've been using your whole life, your own perception. Pareidolia is the tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful, image or pattern in a random or ambiguous visual or auditory stimulus. It's our brain's creative habit of imposing order on chaos, of finding the familiar in the unfamiliar. And it's not a sign of madness or an overactive imagination, well, not necessarily the problematic kind, anyway. It's a fundamental aspect of how human cognition works, a byproduct of our highly evolved pattern recognition software. Think about our evolutionary history. For our ancestors navigating a dangerous world, being able to quickly spot a predator lurking in the bushes, or a friendly face in a crowd, was a matter of life and death. The brain that could instantly recognize the pattern of 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, even from incomplete information or in poor visibility, was a brain that was more likely to survive and pass on its genes. So we developed a hypersensitivity to these patterns. Our brains are hardwired to look for faces. It's better to have a false positive, mistaking a gnarled tree trunk for a bear, than a false negative, failing to see the bear until it's asking you for your picnic basket and your arm. So, when we look at a blurry, shadowed rock formation on Mars, our visual system, particularly a region called the fusiform gyrus, which is heavily involved in facial recognition, gets a little trigger-happy. It sees a few suggestive shapes, a dark patch here, an eye socket, a protrusion there, a nose, a curved line below, a mouth, and it fills in the blanks. It says, aha, I know what this is. It's a face, even if the data is sketchy and ambiguous. It's like an overeager art student who sees a masterpiece in every random paint splotch. This isn't just about faces, though they are a prime target for Pareidolia. We see animals in clouds, religious figures in water stains, hidden messages in scrambled letters. Our auditory system does it too, hence hearing voices in the static of a radio or words in the babbling of a brook, or your name being called when you're home alone and the house is settling. That last one is always a bit unsettling, isn't it? Thanks, brain. Pareidolia is, in essence, our brain playing a perpetual game of cosmic connect the dots, often with dots that aren't really meant to be connected in that particular way. It's a testament to our brain's incredible ability to process information and make rapid judgments, but it also highlights its susceptibility to illusion when faced with ambiguity. It's not a flaw so much as a feature that sometimes works a little too well in environments it wasn't strictly designed for, like interpreting low-resolution satellite imagery from another planet. The face on Mars is a textbook example. The specific lighting conditions in that 1976 Viking image, with the sun low on the horizon, cast long, deep shadows that accentuated certain features and obscured others, creating the illusion of a sculpted visage. Our brains, pre-programmed to find faces and further primed by decades of science fiction about Martians, readily accepted this interpretation. I wanted to see a face. It was a far more compelling narrative than interestingly eroded Mesa. There's a certain comfort in understanding this, isn't there? It demystifies the face without diminishing the wonder of our own minds. It means we're not necessarily being fooled by Mars so much as engaging in a perfectly normal, if sometimes misleading, cognitive process. The universe throws random patterns at us, and our brains, like tireless artists, try to sculpt them into something meaningful. Sometimes the sculpture is a true reflection of reality, sometimes it's a beautiful, fleeting illusion. Recognizing Pareidolia allows us to approach such discoveries with a gentle skepticism, a wry smile, and an appreciation for the imaginative power of our own gray matter. It doesn't mean we stop looking for patterns or stop being curious. It just means we add another layer to our understanding. The understanding of ourselves as imperfect but wonderfully creative observers. We are pattern-seeking creatures in a universe that is often stubbornly, magnificently, patternless in the ways we expect. So, as you drift, consider your own brain, that 3-pound universe in your skull. It's constantly sifting, sorting, interpreting, trying to make sense of the relentless flood of sensory data. And sometimes, in its eagerness to find meaning, it paints a face on a distant rock. There's no need to feel foolish about that. It's just your brain doing its job, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. It's a reminder that the most fascinating landscapes we explore are often the ones within our own minds. And accepting its quirks, its tendency towards pareidolic artistry, is a wonderfully relaxing way to acknowledge our own beautifully flawed humanity. The Martians may not have carved a face, but our brains are always ready to see one, and that, in itself, is a little marvel. And so, armed with our newfound appreciation for Pareidolia, that delightful cognitive quirk that makes us see faces in our breakfast cereal and monumental sculptures on other planets, we return to Cydonia. The face on Mars, that enigmatic, mile-long visage, had stared out from grainy photographs for over 2 decades, fueling speculation, inspiring art, and generally making us wonder if we needed to update our interplanetary welcome basket. But science, bless its persistent, methodical heart, is rarely content to leave such a tantalizing mystery unprobed, especially when it has new toys to play with. The moment of truth, or perhaps more accurately, the moment of higher resolution, began to arrive in the late 1990s and early 2000s. NASA's Mars Global Surveyor, MGS, and later the European Space Agency's Mars Express orbiter, equipped with far more advanced cameras than their Viking predecessor, swung into orbit around the red planet. And you can bet that imaging Cydonia, and specifically the face, was high on their and the public's to-do list. It was time for a cosmic close-up. Imagine the anticipation. For years, proponents of the artificial origin theory had clamored for new images, convinced that clearer pictures would only confirm their suspicions, revealing sharper details of the alien artistry. NASA, while publicly maintaining its natural landform stance, was also no doubt keen to settle the matter. Was it a geological oddity, or was it time to start learning Martian? The new images started to come in. And as they did, the grand, stoic, undeniably face-like visage began to, well, melt. Not literally, of course. Mars is still rather chilly. But its artificial appearance began to dissolve under the relentless, clarifying gaze of higher-resolution optics and different lighting conditions. Remember how the original Viking image was taken with the sun low on the horizon, creating those deep, suggestive shadows? The new images were often taken with the sun at different angles, illuminating the feature more directly, or from different perspectives. And just like that annoying friend who looks completely different when they change their hairstyle and lighting, the face on Mars began to look less like a face and more like a hill. A large, interestingly eroded, but decidedly unsculpted hill. A mesa, to be precise, a flat-topped hill with steep sides, a common geological feature in the American Southwest, and as it turns out, in the Cydonia region of Mars. The eyes, nose, and mouth, that were so compelling in the 1976 image revealed themselves to be random bumps, ridges, and depressions in the rock, their previous coherence a trick of shadow play. The apparent symmetry vanished. The headdress dissolved into natural, crumbling slopes. From some angles, it still looked vaguely suggestive, if you squinted and used your imagination, and our brains, as we know, are always happy to oblige with a bit of imaginative squinting. But the undeniable, monumental, somebody built this quality? It evaporated like morning mist. It was, for some, a moment of profound disappointment. The mystery, the romance, the sheer wow factor of a giant alien carving deflated into geology. How terribly mundane. Some diehard believers, of course, refused to accept the new evidence, claiming the new images were doctored, or that NASA was deliberately choosing angles that obscured the true nature of the monument. Conspiracy theories, much like hardy Martian lichens, if they existed, can be remarkably resilient. But for most, the evidence was compelling. The face on Mars was indeed a natural formation. A rather striking one, to be sure, a testament to the slow, patient artistry of wind and erosion over millions, perhaps billions, of years. But not the work of intelligent hands. Not a message from a lost civilization. Just a rock. A big, interestingly shaped rock. There's an almost comical anticlimax to it, isn't there? Decades of speculation, books, documentaries, heated debates, all brought to a rather quiet, dusty end by a few clearer photographs. It's like preparing for a heavyweight championship fight, only for one of the contenders to turn out to be a cleverly disguised sack of potatoes. The universe does have a peculiar sense of humor. It builds up our expectations with a tantalizing glimpse, then pulls back the curtain to reveal something far more ordinary, yet in its own way just as fascinating if you're willing to adjust your perspective. The unmasking of the face on Mars is a beautiful illustration of the scientific process. A curious anomaly is observed. Hypotheses are formed, some more outlandish than others. Better data is gathered, and the hypotheses are refined or discarded based on that new evidence. There's no shame in having been intrigued by the face. Its resemblance was uncanny. But there's a deep, quiet satisfaction in seeing the mystery resolved, even if the resolution is less sci-fi blockbuster and more geology textbook. It's a gentle lesson in humility too. The universe isn't necessarily hiding monumental secrets from us. Sometimes, a rock is just a rock even if it winks at you in a certain light. And our powerful brains, so good at finding patterns, can sometimes lead us on a merry chase down a Martian rabbit hole. So, as you settle into that comfortable state between wakefulness and sleep, picture that Martian mesa. No longer a brooding alien sphinx, but a silent, stony witness to the long, slow, unthinking processes that shape a planet. There's a stark grandeur to that, a beauty in its naturalness. The face may have lost its mystery, but Mars itself gained a little more clarity. And in that clarity, in that gentle unmasking of illusion, there is a profound and deeply relaxing sense of peace. The universe doesn't always give us the romantic answers we crave, but it always, eventually, offers the truth. And the truth, even when it's just a pile of rocks, has its own stark, soothing song. Section 9. The face on Mars may have been the most famous example of us seeing familiar shapes in the Martian landscape, the undisputed heavyweight champion of planetary Pareidolia, but it was by no means the last. As our robotic explorers, the rovers Sojourner, Spirit, Opportunity, Curiosity, Perseverance, began to trundle across the rusty plains, sending back thousands upon thousands of high-resolution images, a new, more intimate game of I Spy on Mars began. And our brains, ever eager to find the familiar in the alien, have had a field day. These rover images are a treasure trove. They show us Mars with breathtaking clarity. Pebbles, rocks, dunes, distant hills, the texture of the soil. It's like having a virtual presence on another world. And with so much visual data, so many oddly shaped rocks sculpted by wind and perhaps ancient water, it's inevitable that some of them are going to look like things. Familiar things. Sometimes, amusingly mundane things. Think about it. You're looking at a landscape littered with countless rocks, each one unique, weathered over eons into an infinite variety of forms. Statistically, some of them are bound to vaguely resemble objects we recognize. And the internet, being the internet, is exceptionally good at spotting these cosmic coincidences and, shall we say, enthusiastically sharing them. So, what have we found on Mars, courtesy of our rover cameras and our pattern-happy brains? Oh, the list is wonderfully eclectic. There was the Martian rat, or squirrel, a rock that, from a certain angle, looked uncannily like a small rodent hunkered down between other stones. Cue headlines: NASA rover photographs life on Mars. Spoiler, it was a rock. There was the Martian thigh bone, an elongated, slightly curved rock that, if you squinted and had a particular anatomical bent, could be imagined as a fossilized femur. Also a rock. We've had sightings of a Martian mermaid or alien woman, a small, shadowy figure that some interpreted as a tiny, robed humanoid. A cleverly shadowed rock, surprise, surprise. There was the Martian traffic light, a stack of 3 rounded rocks that bore a passing resemblance to, well, a traffic light, presumably for regulating the flow of Martian dune buggies. Rocks. Stacked. Naturally. There was even a Martian spoon, an elegant, long-handled shape that looked remarkably like a piece of cutlery dropped by a careless Martian picnicker. A ventifact, most likely, a rock shaped by wind-blown sand into an unusual form. And let's not forget the shiny objects, the bits of debris that occasionally glint in the Martian sun. Sometimes these are genuinely intriguing, leading to closer investigation by the rover teams. Often they turn out to be bits of the rover itself, a fleck of paint, a small piece of discarded heat shield material from the landing. Less exciting than alien artifacts, perhaps, but a good reminder that we are, quite literally, leaving our mark on Mars, sometimes in the form of litter. We can't even keep our own backyard tidy on another planet. Humans, eh? Each of these discoveries typically follows a predictable pattern. An image is released. Someone, often an amateur space enthusiast with a keen eye for the anomalous, or a lot of time on their hands, spots the object. It gets posted online. It goes viral. Speculation runs rampant. Is it proof of past life? Ancient civilizations? Careless aliens? Then, inevitably, planetary scientists will weigh in, patiently explaining the likely geological explanation, the effects of wind erosion, the play of light and shadow, the resolution limits of the camera. The object is almost invariably reclassified as interesting rock formation number 7342. There's a gentle comedy to it all, isn't there? Our sophisticated billion-dollar rovers, bristling with cutting-edge scientific instruments, are out there doing serious geology, looking for signs of ancient habitable environments, and what makes the headlines? A rock that looks a bit like a donut, or a discarded flip-flop. It's a testament to our enduring fascination with the relatable, the familiar, even on a world that is profoundly alien. We project our earthly clutter onto the Martian landscape. If we lost a spoon in the garden, it would be annoying. If we find a spoon on Mars, it's cosmic. This isn't to mock the people who spot these things. It's genuinely fun to scan through rover images, and our brains, as we've established, are wired for this kind of pattern matching. It's a form of public engagement with space exploration, even if it sometimes veers into the fanciful. It keeps Mars in the public consciousness, and it reminds us that exploration is an ongoing process, full of little puzzles and visual surprises. These smaller, more fleeting illusions, the squirrels, the bones, the spoons, lack the monumental grandeur of Lowell's Canals or the Cydonia Face. They are the amusing footnotes in the story of Martian Pareidolia. But they serve the same purpose for our sleepy contemplation. They highlight the creative, sometimes overzealous, nature of our own perception. They show us how easily we can be tricked by appearances, especially when we want to find something extraordinary. And they remind us that the universe is full of random shapes, and given enough rocks, you'll eventually find one that looks like your Uncle Barry. So, as you drift deeper, imagine yourself sifting through those rover images. Each click reveals a new patch of rusty, dusty ground. And there, nestled among the ordinary stones, is a shape that makes you pause. Is that a garden gnome? Probably not. But for a fleeting moment, the mundane and the cosmic collide in a delightful, slightly absurd, and ultimately harmless way. Is the universe winking at you and your brain winking back? And in that silent, shared joke between you and a pile of alien rocks, there's a peculiar kind of peace. The peace of knowing that even in our most advanced explorations, there's always room for a little bit of human silliness. Sweet dreams of Martian squirrels. They're probably just as sleepy as you are. Word count, 1099. Awaiting, continue. So, we've journeyed through grand canals that weren't, heard phantom radio calls from silent civilizations, watched seasonal blooms that were merely dust shifts, stared into a monumental face that dissolved into a hill, and chuckled at rocks resembling everything from squirrels to kitchenware. What does all this tell us as we float here in the quiet space between wakefulness and sleep? It tells us that Mars, perhaps more than any other celestial body, has served as the universe's ultimate Rorschach test for humanity. You know the Rorschach test, don't you? Those ambiguous ink blots that psychologists use to delve into the hidden landscapes of the mind. You look at a splash of ink and what you see, a butterfly, a monster, your stern Aunt Mildred, supposedly reveals something about your personality, your fears, your desires. Mars has been our planetary ink blot. We've gazed at its blurry, reddish, tantalizingly detailed surface, and we have seen ourselves, our hopes, our anxieties, our profound, aching need for connection, or at least for a really good story. Think about it. Lowell, peering through his telescope, saw not just lines, but a reflection of his own era's engineering prowess and colonial ambitions, albeit projected onto a dying Martian race engaged in a desperate struggle for survival. He saw a grand, tragic narrative, perhaps echoing Victorian sensibilities about ancient, fading empires. The public, eager for marvels in an age of rapid technological change, embraced it. The ink blot of Mars reflected a fascination with grand design and intelligent purpose. Then came the face on Mars. In an era grappling with the implications of the space race, the Cold War, and a growing awareness of humanity's own capacity for self-destruction, the face offered a different kind of reflection. Was it a beacon from a lost, wise civilization? A warning? A monument to a cosmic tragedy we might one day share? It mirrored our anxieties about our own future, our place in the universe, and the lingering question of whether we were indeed alone, or if there were elders out there, perhaps long gone, who had faced similar existential crossroads. The Martian ink blot this time showed us a haunting, monumental question mark. And the more recent discoveries from rover images? The squirrels, the spoons, the fleeting figures. What do these reflect? Perhaps our modern, internet-fueled desire for instant gratification, for the quirky and shareable. In an age of information overload, these tiny, anomalous details provide little dopamine hits of novelty. They are less about grand, overarching narratives and more about fleeting curiosities, quickly consumed and just as quickly replaced by the next weird Mars rock. The ink blot has become more fragmented, reflecting a more distracted, perhaps more ironic engagement with the cosmos. Oh look, a Martian donut. Cool. What's next? Mars has been a canvas for our scientific aspirations, certainly, but it has also been a blank slate for our wildest speculations, our most romantic dreams, and even our silliest whimsies. It's close enough to seem almost attainable, yet alien enough to accommodate almost any fiction we care to project onto it. Its rusty surface holds the smudged fingerprints of our collective unconscious. Why Mars specifically? Its proximity is key, of course. It's the boy next door of planets, if the boy next door was a desiccated, irradiated, and probably lifeless desert. But it's also its almost Earth-like qualities. It has polar ice caps, seasons however dusty, an atmosphere however thin, and evidence of ancient rivers and lakes. It's like Earth's slightly less fortunate cousin, the one who made some bad choices early on and never quite recovered. This tantalizing similarity makes it just plausible enough to hang our hopes on. If it was like Earth once, maybe, just maybe, it harbored life. Maybe it still does in some hidden niche. Maybe they are still there, just very, very shy. Or very, very small. Or very, very good at hiding from our rovers. This projection isn't necessarily a bad thing. Our imaginative engagement with Mars has fueled public interest, which in turn has helped to support the very real, very scientific exploration of the planet. The dreams of Canals and Faces, however illusory, played a part in getting us to send the probes and rovers that are now giving us a much clearer, if less overtly romantic picture. Fiction, in a way, can be the scout that ventures ahead, mapping out the territories of possibility before science arrives with its more precise surveying equipment. But it's a useful and deeply relaxing thought to remember that when we look at Mars, we are often seeing a reflection. The universe is vast and largely indifferent to our narratives. It doesn't particularly care if we populate its planets with industrious engineers or monumental sculptors. It just is. And our attempts to interpret it, to make it conform to our stories, often say far more about our own internal landscapes than about the external reality. So, as you drift towards sleep, consider Mars not just as a physical place, but as a psychological space. A place where humanity has grappled with its biggest questions, its deepest longings. The red planet as a mirror showing us our ingenuity, our capacity for wonder, our stubborn pattern-seeking brains, and our sometimes hilarious, sometimes poignant tendency to see what we want to see. And in recognizing that mirror, there is a kind of peace. The peace of self-awareness. The peace of knowing that the universe is mysterious enough without us needing to invent quite so many extra mysteries. The truth of Mars as it slowly unfolds is wondrous enough on its own. And our own minds, in their quest to understand it, are perhaps the most wondrous and perplexing landscapes of all. Having explored the many ways Mars has served as a cosmic Rorschach test, reflecting our own imaginations back at us, let's now gently shift our focus. Let's allow the mists of Pareidolia and wishful thinking to dissipate, like morning fog under a strengthening sun. What are we left with when the canals dry up, the face dissolves into a hill, and the Martian squirrels are revealed as mere stones? We are left with Mars itself, and the austere, stark, and profoundly scientific beauty of what is on that rusty, dusty world is, in its own way, more captivating and ultimately more soothing than any fiction we could have imposed upon it. Imagine, if you will, standing on the surface of Mars. Not the Mars of Lowell's romantic, dying civilizations, nor the Mars of Cydonia's enigmatic sculptors, but the real Mars as revealed by our decades of robotic exploration. The air, if you could call it that, is incredibly thin, less than 1% of Earth's atmospheric pressure. It's mostly carbon dioxide and it's bitingly cold, the average temperature hovering around a rather nippy -80 degrees Fahrenheit, or -62 Celsius. Not exactly beach weather. The sky above isn't blue, but a pale butterscotch pink, tinted by fine dust particles suspended in the atmosphere. The landscape around you is a vista of reddish-brown dust and rocks, stretching to a hazy horizon. Perhaps you're in a vast crater, its rim a distant, jagged line. Or maybe you're on a broad, windswept plain, littered with volcanic rocks and sculpted by winds that, while gentle by earthly hurricane standards due to the thin air, are relentless and carry fine, abrasive sand. You might see Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system, 3 times the height of Mount Everest, its caldera so vast you wouldn't even realize you were standing on a mountain. Or Valles Marineris, a canyon system that would dwarf our Grand Canyon, stretching for a distance equivalent to the width of the United States. These are not illusions. These are real, monumental geological features, sculpted by forces and timescales that stagger the human imagination. There are no canals, but there are ancient, dried-up riverbeds, valleys, and deltas. These are not the work of industrious Martians, but evidence of a time billions of years ago, when liquid water flowed freely on the Martian surface. Our rovers have found smooth, rounded pebbles, indistinguishable from those in an earthly stream. They've found sedimentary rocks laid down in ancient lakes, containing clay minerals that form in the presence of water. This isn't speculation, this is hard, geological fact, written in the stones of Mars. The planet was once warmer, wetter, and potentially more hospitable to life as we know it. The romance isn't in a dying civilization, but in a dying planet, one that lost its magnetic field, saw its atmosphere stripped away by the solar wind, and slowly transformed from a potentially habitable world into the cold, dry desert we see today. There's a profound, melancholic beauty in that story, a cosmic tragedy far grander than Lowell could have envisioned. There are no giant faces carved by aliens, but there are rocks of incredible diversity. Basalts from ancient volcanic eruptions, sandstones, mudstones, conglomerates. Rocks containing hematite, blueberries, small spherical concretions that hint at past water activity. Rocks laced with sulfates, gypsum, and other minerals that whisper tales of ancient, salty seas or evaporating lakes. Each rock is a tiny time capsule, a piece of Martian history waiting to be read by our robotic geologists. The rovers drill into them, zap them with lasers to analyze their composition, photograph their intricate textures. It's slow, patient detective work, piecing together the planet's 4.5 billion year story, one sample at a time. There are no seasonal blooms of Martian vegetation, but there are delicate frosts of water ice and carbon dioxide ice that form on the ground in winter. There are dust devils, towering whirlwinds that dance across the plains, leaving dark tracks as they sweep away the brighter surface dust. There are clouds, wispy and ethereal, made of water ice crystals, high in the thin atmosphere. And there are those planet-encircling dust storms that can rage for weeks, obscuring the entire surface, a reminder of the dynamic, if harsh, Martian environment. This is the real Mars. It's not a world teeming with obvious life, nor is it a gallery of alien megasculptures. It's a world of subtle wonders, of geological history writ large, of stark, minimalist beauty. It's a world that challenges our definitions of interesting and beautiful. It doesn't offer the easy comforts of earthly green, but it has a profound, desolate grandeur all its own. There's a deep sense of peace to be found in contemplating this reality. It's the peace of accepting things as they are, rather than as we wish them to be. The universe is not obliged to provide us with companions or convenient narratives. But it does provide us with endless complexity, endless opportunities for discovery, and a beauty that often lies in the intricate workings of natural law, rather than in the grand designs of imagined intelligences. So, as you drift, let the fictional Mars fade. Let the real Mars come into focus. A world of ancient riverbeds, colossal volcanoes, planet-wide dust storms, and rocks that tell stories billions of years old. It's a quieter Mars, perhaps, than the one of our collective imagination. But it is a Mars that is, in its own stark and silent way, far more wondrous. And in that wonder, found not in illusion but in scientifically verified reality, there is a profound and deeply soothing truth. The universe is amazing enough as it is. We don't need to embellish. We just need to look, listen, and learn. And that, in itself, is a journey towards peace. Having painted a picture of the real, scientifically observed Mars, a world of stark geological beauty and ancient, dried-up waterways rather than bustling canals or sculpted faces, it's worth pausing to ask a gentle, sleepy question. Why? Why this persistent desire, this almost compulsive need to find life, intelligence, or at least something interestingly anomalous on Mars? Why did we so readily embrace Lowell's Canals, the Cydonia Face, or the fleeting images of Martian squirrels? What is it about the red planet that makes us want to believe, even when the evidence, or lack thereof, points elsewhere? The answer, like Mars itself, is layered and complex, but at its core, it touches upon some of our most fundamental human characteristics. Our innate curiosity, our social nature, and perhaps, a deep-seated cosmic loneliness. We are explorers by nature. From our earliest ancestors venturing out of Africa, to ancient mariners sailing into uncharted seas, to our modern astronauts reaching for the stars, there's a powerful drive within us to see what's over the next hill, beyond the horizon, or on the next planet. Mars, being relatively close and somewhat Earth-like, became a natural focal point for this exploratory urge, even when that exploration was initially confined to the blurry lens of a telescope and the fertile ground of our imaginations. We are also profoundly social creatures. We seek connection, communication, and kinship. The thought of being truly alone in this vast, sprawling universe can be unsettling. It's like being the only person at a party, a cosmic wallflower in an unimaginably large ballroom. Finding life on Mars, especially intelligent life, would change that equation instantly. It would mean we're not unique in that profound, potentially terrifying way. It would mean there's someone else out there, another mind, another experience of the cosmos. Even finding simple Martian microbes would be a monumental discovery, suggesting that life is not a bizarre fluke confined to our little blue marble, but perhaps a common cosmic occurrence. Mars therefore became a sort of cosmic hope chest, where we stored our longing for companionship in the universe. Then there's the sheer scale of the cosmos to consider. It's so vast, so ancient, so mind-bogglingly empty in places, that our own existence can feel rather small and insignificant. Finding evidence of another civilization, especially one that left behind grand monuments or planet-spanning engineering works, would somehow validate the idea of intelligent life as a significant cosmic phenomenon. It would suggest that minds can indeed arise and shape their environments on a grand scale, that we're not just a fleeting accident. The Canals and the Face, in their imagined grandeur, offered a kind of cosmic reassurance, a sense that intelligence matters on a planetary scale. And let's be honest, there's also the simple human love of a good story. Martians, whether they were wise engineers, enigmatic artists, or just fuzzy little critters, made for fantastic narratives. They provided drama, mystery, and a sense of wonder. A universe filled with nothing but rocks, gas, and radiation is, while scientifically fascinating, perhaps a little dry for the storyteller in all of us. We crave characters, plots, and the thrill of the unknown being revealed. Mars offered a perfect stage for these cosmic dramas to play out in our minds. It was and still is the ultimate what-if planet. Furthermore, our brains, as we've discussed with Pareidolia, are wired to find meaning and agency. We see a complex pattern, and our instinct is to assume it was created by an agent and intelligence. It's hard for us to accept that incredibly intricate and seemingly ordered structures, like a spiral galaxy, or even a perfectly formed snowflake, can arise from simple physical laws acting over vast amounts of time, without a conscious designer. So, when we saw lines on Mars, we thought engineers. When we saw a face-like shape, we thought sculptors. It's an understandable cognitive leap, a projection of our own modes of creation onto the universe. There's also perhaps a touch of existential projection. If Mars once had a civilization that died out or a biosphere that collapsed, it serves as a cautionary tale for us here on Earth. Our fascination with a dying Mars might reflect our own anxieties about the future of our planet, about climate change, resource depletion, or societal collapse. By imagining these scenarios playing out on Mars, we can explore them at a safe, fictional distance. Mars becomes a laboratory for our existential fears. Ultimately, our desire to find something extraordinary on Mars is a very human trait. It's a blend of scientific curiosity, philosophical longing, a storyteller's instinct, and the quirks of our cognitive wiring. It's not something to be ashamed of, or to be entirely dismissed as foolishness. It's part of what makes us who we are, questing, pattern-seeking, storytelling beings, adrift in a vast cosmos, looking for echoes of ourselves in the silence. And as you drift into sleep, acknowledge that gentle human yearning. It's okay to have hope for Martian canals and faces. It's okay to still feel a tiny thrill when a rover image shows an oddly shaped rock. It's part of the grand, shared human adventure of trying to understand our place in the universe. The key is to balance that imaginative hope with the gentle, clarifying light of scientific evidence. And to find peace not just in the stories we invent, but in the equally wondrous, if sometimes more austere, stories the universe itself is waiting to tell us, if we only learn how to listen. The desire to believe is a powerful, soothing force, even if what we believe in turns out to be just a trick of light on a dusty, distant world. So, we've explored our human tendency to paint Mars with the vibrant colors of our own imagination, to see canals where there are only channels, faces where there are only mesas, and life where there is, as far as we currently know, only intriguing chemistry and a lot of very old dust. Now, let's gently turn our attention to the process that helps us distinguish these captivating illusions from the starker, yet often more wondrous, reality, the scientific method. Science, in this context, isn't a dream killer. It's more like a very patient, very meticulous optician, gently adjusting the lenses through which we view the cosmos, bringing things into sharper, clearer focus, even if that means some of our favorite phantoms fade away. And there's a profound, sleep-inducing comfort in that clarity. Think of science not as a rigid set of facts, but as a way of questioning, a process of discovery. It begins with observation, seeing those lines on Mars, spotting that face-like feature. Then comes the hypothesis, perhaps they're canals built by intelligent beings, perhaps it's a monument. This is where the imagination, the kind that fueled Lowell and the Cydonia enthusiasts, plays a vital role. Science needs creative leaps, bold ideas. But then, crucially, comes the testing. This is where science diverges from pure storytelling. A good story only needs to be compelling. A scientific hypothesis needs to be verifiable, or at least falsifiable. How do we test hypotheses about Mars? We build better telescopes. We send probes and orbiters with more powerful cameras and sensors. We land rovers to analyze the geology up close. Each new piece of data is like another piece of a giant cosmic puzzle. Sometimes the new piece confirms our initial idea, and the picture becomes clearer. More often, especially with Mars, the new piece makes us rethink our initial interpretation. The canals resolved into disconnected albedo features under better viewing conditions. The face changed its expression dramatically when seen with higher resolution and different lighting. This process of refinement, of self-correction, is the heart of science. It's not about being right all the time. It's about being willing to be proven wrong in the face of new evidence. There's a profound humility in that, a willingness to let the universe have the last word. Lowell, for all his conviction, was eventually superseded by astronomers with better tools and more cautious interpretations. The proponents of the artificial face were confronted with images that simply didn't support their grander claims. This isn't a failure of imagination, it's a triumph of evidence. And what science reveals, when it gently peels back the layers of illusion, is often far stranger, more complex, and more beautiful than the initial fictions. The idea of Martian engineers building canals is certainly romantic. But the reality of Mars as a planet that once had vast oceans and flowing rivers, a world that lost its atmosphere and transformed into a frozen desert over billions of years due to subtle shifts in its internal dynamics and its relationship with the sun. That's a story of epic, almost tragic, grandeur. It's a narrative written not by intelligent beings, but by the fundamental laws of physics and chemistry playing out on a planetary scale. Similarly, a giant alien-carved face is a thrilling concept. But the reality of a landscape sculpted by eons of wind erosion, where colossal volcanoes rise into a thin pink sky and canyons yawn wider than continents, where dust devils dance and subtle frosts form. This is a testament to the patient, unthinking artistry of nature. It's a beauty that doesn't require intent, only time and the relentless operation of physical processes. Science doesn't rob us of wonder, it refines it. It redirects our awe from the imagined to the observed. It teaches us to find beauty in the intricate dance of geology and atmospheric dynamics, in the subtle chemistry of rocks, in the vast sweep of cosmic time. It's a different kind of wonder, perhaps less immediately personal, less anthropocentric, but ultimately deeper and more enduring because it's grounded in reality. There's a deep comfort in this. In a world often filled with misinformation and competing narratives, the scientific method offers a pathway to a shared understanding, a consensus based on evidence. It's a slow, painstaking process, full of debates and revisions. It doesn't offer instant answers or easy certainties, but it inches us closer to the truth, or at least to a more accurate approximation of it. And as you lie there, letting go of the day's complexities, consider the gentle, persistent rhythm of scientific inquiry. It's like a slow, deep breath for the collective human mind. It inhales mystery and exhales understanding. It acknowledges our illusions, our biases, our tendency to see patterns where none exist, and it gently, patiently guides us towards a clearer view. The universe, as revealed by science, may not always be what we expect, or even what we romantically hope for, but it is always, always fascinating. And in that endless fascination, in that quiet unfolding of understanding, there is a profound and deeply restful peace. Science, our gentle reality check, still finds wonders, often in the places we least expect them, once our eyes have adjusted to the true light of the cosmos. As we drift through these Martian memories, these echoes of illusions and the gentle clarifications of science, we arrive at a surprisingly comforting place. The solace found in unmasking those very illusions. It might seem counterintuitive. Shouldn't discovering that the canals aren't real, that the face is just a hill, or that the Martian squirrel is merely a rock, be a source of disappointment? A loss of magic? And perhaps for a fleeting moment it is. But linger there a little longer in that space of revealed truth, and a deeper, more serene kind of comfort can begin to settle in. There's a certain anxiety, isn't there, in believing in something grand and mysterious that remains just out of reach, unconfirmed, debated. Lowell's canals, if real, implied a vast, dying civilization, perhaps one watching us, perhaps one we might one day encounter with unpredictable consequences. The face on Mars, if artificial, spoke of unknown intelligences, unknown motives, a monumental secret kept by the cosmos, or by NASA, depending on your preferred narrative. These are exciting ideas, certainly, but they also carry an undercurrent of unease, the slight tremor of the unknown and potentially overwhelming. It's like hearing a strange noise downstairs when you're home alone. Your imagination can conjure all sorts of scenarios, some thrilling, many quite unsettling. But when science, with its steady lamp, illuminates the scene and reveals that the noise was just the house settling, or the cat knocking something over, even if you don't own a cat, which is a different kind of unsettling, but we'll leave that for another night, there's a release. The tension dissipates. The monster under the bed is revealed to be a pile of laundry. And in that revelation there is peace. The unmasking of Martian illusions offers a similar kind of cognitive relief. When we understand that the canals were a trick of the eye and Lowell's own fervent imagination, the pressure to reconcile our world with his complex Martian society vanishes. We are no longer dealing with the implications of a neighboring planet engaged in desperate planet-wide engineering. We are simply dealing with geology and optics, much less existentially demanding. When the face on Mars resolves into a naturally eroded mesa, the grand, shadowy questions about its builders and their intentions fade away. We don't need to ponder our relationship with these hypothetical ancient Martians, or worry about what messages they were trying to send. It's just a hill. A very interesting hill, perhaps from a geological standpoint, but its power to evoke a sense of cosmic mystery and potential alien agency is diminished, and with it, a certain kind of subtle, background mental hum. Even the small-scale Pareidolia, the rocks that look like animals or objects, finding out they are just rocks can be strangely calming. It reaffirms our understanding of the world. It means the universe isn't constantly throwing sentient squirrels or discarded alien cutlery in our path. It means that, for the most part, rocks are rocks, and the universe operates on principles we can, with effort, understand. There's a profound stability in that. This comfort comes not from a dismissal of wonder, but from a grounding in reality. Our imaginations are boundless, and that's a beautiful thing. But they can also be tiring if left to roam unchecked in the fields of speculation. Science provides a gentle tether, a way to anchor our understanding. It allows us to appreciate the true wonders of Mars, its ancient watery past, its colossal volcanoes, its subtle atmospheric phenomena, without the added layer of anxiety or confusion that comes from mistaking illusion for reality. There's also the comfort of shared understanding. When the scientific community reaches a consensus based on evidence that the canals were an illusion or the face is natural, it creates a common ground. We are no longer in a fragmented world of competing, unprovable theories. We are, for the most part, looking at the same Mars, understanding it through the same set of established principles. This shared reality is a deeply social and psychologically soothing state. It's like everyone in the room finally agreeing on what they're seeing, rather than arguing about ghosts in the shadows. And perhaps, most profoundly, there's the comfort of intellectual honesty. It feels good to acknowledge when we've been mistaken, to adjust our views in light of new information. It's a sign of growth, of learning. To cling to an illusion once it has been clearly and gently debunked is to live in a state of cognitive dissonance, which is inherently stressful. To let go of the illusion, to accept the simpler, evidence-based explanation, is to find a kind of intellectual peace. So, as you relax, as your mind becomes quieter, let go of any lingering attachment to those romantic Martian fictions. Appreciate them as charming historical curiosities, as testament to our human capacity for imagination. But find your deeper rest in the reality that science has unveiled. A reality that is, in its own way, just as awe-inspiring, but without the unsettling ambiguity. The comfort of unmasking illusions is the comfort of clarity, of understanding, of knowing that while our minds can play wonderful tricks on us, we also possess the tools to see beyond them, into the stark, beautiful, and ultimately very real universe that surrounds us. And in that clarity, there is a profound and wonderfully sleep-inducing calm. And so, our gentle journey through the mists of Martian misconceptions, through the grand theaters of our own imaginations, and into the clearer, if dustier light of scientific understanding, draws to a soft close. We've walked with Percival Lowell along his phantom canals, gazed upon the stoic, illusory face of Cydonia, and perhaps even spotted a fleeting Martian squirrel or two in the rocky plains. We've seen Mars as a mirror, reflecting our hopes, our fears, and our irrepressible human habit of trying to find meaning, even if it means inventing it whole cloth from shadows and wishful thinking. What do we carry with us as we prepare to drift from this cosmic contemplation into true deep sleep? Perhaps it's a renewed appreciation for the wonderfully quirky, pattern-seeking nature of our own minds. Our brains, those 3-pound marvels, are so eager to connect, to understand, to find the familiar in the alien. They paint faces on rocks and civilizations onto blurry telescopic images with an artist's enthusiasm, if not always with an engineer's precision. And that's okay. It's part of the human experience, this dance between what we see and what we want to see. There's a certain charm, a gentle comedy, in our species' tendency to project its own image onto the cosmos, like a child drawing smiley faces on every inanimate object. We also carry a sense of the profound, almost melancholic beauty of the real Mars. A world that once held the promise of water, perhaps even the whisper of life, now a cold, rusty desert, its secrets locked away in ancient rocks and windswept plains. It's a story of planetary evolution, of cosmic chances taken and lost, a narrative far grander and more poignant than any tale of dying canal builders. There's a stark, honest beauty in this scientifically revealed Mars, a beauty that doesn't need our embellishments to be compelling. It simply is in all its dusty, desolate glory. And perhaps, most importantly for our journey towards peaceful sleep, we carry the comforting realization that understanding, that the gentle unmasking of illusion, brings its own unique serenity. The universe, in its vastness and indifference, can sometimes feel overwhelming. Our attempts to populate it with familiar narratives, with canals and faces, can be seen as a way to make it a little less intimidating, a little more manageable. But there's an even deeper peace to be found in accepting its realities, however stark, and in marveling at the intricate, impersonal laws that govern it. Knowing that the canals were an optical effect, that the face is a trick of light and shadow, that the seasonal changes are driven by dust and wind, these truths don't diminish the wonder of Mars. They simply refocus it. They anchor it. They allow us to appreciate Mars for what it truly is, not for what we once imagined it to be. And in that acceptance there is a profound letting go. A release from the need to impose our stories, and an opening to the far vaster, more complex story the universe itself is telling. So, as you lie there on the cusp of sleep, imagine Mars. Not the Mars of frantic speculation or shadowy conspiracies, but the quiet, patient Mars of scientific discovery. Picture its vast, silent landscapes, its towering, extinct volcanoes, its ancient, dry riverbeds hinting at a wetter past. It's a world that has been an object of human fascination for centuries, a screen for our projections, a catalyst for our curiosity. It has fooled us, yes, in the most endearing and human of ways. But in doing so, it has also taught us so much about itself, about the process of science, and most amusingly, about ourselves. Let the thought of that dusty, probably uninhabited world soothe you. Its silence is not an empty silence, but one filled with the whispers of geological time, of planetary change, of the slow, indifferent, yet magnificent workings of the cosmos. There are no Martians there, as far as we know, to judge our fanciful interpretations or our sometimes wild leaps of imagination. There is just the wind, the dust, and the rocks keeping their ancient counsel. And in that vast, impersonal stillness, there is a strange and profound comfort. A comfort that says it's okay to dream, it's okay to wonder, and it's also okay to let the dreams give way to a reality that is, in its own way, just as extraordinary and perhaps even more deeply peaceful. Sweet dreams, then, of a dust-covered, well-understood, and wonderfully, ironically relaxing Mars. The universe doesn't mind if you got it wrong a few times. It's got all the time in the world. And so, tonight, do you? And now, let all thoughts of Mars, its illusions and its realities, gently begin to recede, like the planet itself shrinking in the viewport of a departing spacecraft. Feel the weight of your body, a comforting anchor in the soft haven of your bed. The universe, with all its bewildering scale, its stunning beauty, and its rather unsettling indifference to your daily anxieties, will still be there tomorrow. Tonight, however, none of its grand pronouncements or its chilling silences can touch you here. You've journeyed far, into the recesses of human imagination and across the dusty plains of another world. You've smiled, perhaps, at our collective capacity for wishful thinking, and found a quiet satisfaction in the steady, clarifying light of science. Remember that even our mistakes, our grand cosmic misinterpretations, are part of the larger, unfolding story of understanding. There's a beauty in that process, a gentle human rhythm of conjecture and correction. The vastness out there, the cold, the radiation, the sheer mind-numbing emptiness punctuated by incandescent violence or the slow creep of entropy, yes, it's all true. But tonight, that truth is just a distant murmur, like cosmic background radiation, too faint to disturb your peace. You are here, safe, and the universe, for all its capacity to inspire awe and a touch of existential dread, has also, paradoxically, provided the very stage for your consciousness, your ability to ponder these things and then, thankfully, to switch them off. So let the grand, indifferent cosmos do its thing. Let it spin its galaxies, birth its stars, and carve its mesas with wind and time. Your only task now is to surrender to the pull of sleep, as gentle and inevitable as gravity. Let your breath be slow and even, a quiet tide rising and falling. The mysteries will wait. The questions will remain. But for now, there is only this moment, this peace, this descent into the velvet darkness of restorative slumber. Cosmic dreams indeed. You've earned them.